Good Monday morning. As you know, I make live streams every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time. This week I talked to Kyle from one of our sponsors, CircleCI, and we talked about continuous integration. And one of the questions that arose I think it wasn't so much of a question, it was, I hate testing. And we just mused on that for a bit, I empathized and talked about the dreads and blessings of testing. And this clip that you're gonna see is that. If you're shopping for cloud-based continuous integration, I really recommend you check out CircleCI. There's a link in the episode description if you want to tell them that you came from here. If you want to watch the full live stream instead of just this clip, there's also a link in the episode description. All right, without further ado, now on to the clip where we discuss I hate testing. Dragon me, said the questline in the beginning of the streams, I hate me, but I hate testing.
I saw it. I'm not going to say I don't understand where you're coming from. I hate setting up testing.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
What I don't hate, and when I say setting up testing, I don't mean CircleCI config. I genuinely mean that part is really easy. The part that's a little annoying is actually writing your tests, because that's something that you as the developer have to, it's a new learning curve. You have to go learn what is an assertion framework, what is all this. So you have to write your tests, add them to, if you're using Jest or something like that, you have some kind of test runner. Actually configuring that on CircleCI is the easy part, but once you have done that painful thing, your life becomes so much easier.
Yeah, it's I find figuring out how to test a new thing is my least favorite thing in the world. When people don't have a clear, I'm struggling with React hooks now so much, how to inject hooks and how to test them is, I just want to kill myself.
I think Ava might cover that. That Ava testing framework.
Yeah, but the thing is, testing the hooks itself it's okay, but I want to also inject them, and that is not explained anywhere, because everybody uses Jest mock, which I don't want to use, because I hate these magical injection things, because I don't know how to fix them if they break, because just super magical. And I don't know, I like the simplicity of normal injecting, and there's no normal injecting in this thing. This is just
I feel like this is the curse of JavaScript. We get all the cool things, and then you have to figure out how to use all the cool things because they're brand new.
But when it comes to I hate testing, I think that developer, after being in development for a while, there is one thing that you hate more than all of these things, and that is fixing something that does not have any automated tests. If you have a code base which is not covered by anything, and you are the unlucky person being tasked with doing this critical change and this huge interconnected unmodular thing that has no tests. You have no idea how to fix it. You don't know what the cases are that is supposed to work. It's perhaps let's say that it's 400 lines of code. That means that that's a lot of things that are supposed to work there. If you don't have automated tests, you have no idea to test that. Even if you are the person that wrote it, you can't possibly know all those cases off the top of your head, especially not if it's written a couple of months, let alone a couple of years ago. So it's that horrible, awful situation that often gets me writing tests even when it's hard.
I guess good transition point to another type of testing that would somewhat help with that, not totally solve the problem, but if anyone has heard of code coverage testing before, there are a few code coverage providers, a few code coverage tools, but there are tools out there that you would add to your CI pipeline as well that specifically just look to make sure that for every file or function or class or whatever, there is a corresponding test that goes with it. And you can set, you can use that just for reporting, but you could also set thresholds that says, oh, hey, if if more than 30% of my project goes untested, consider that pipeline failed. And then basically that's, no one's going to stop you unless it's, your job. But at that point, you should consider adding more testing before going on to deployments.
The Magoo73 says, managing a team of devs, I hate having them constantly running mundane things like tests, builds and deployments. We can and should automate that stuff so it gets done right every time and they can spend their time being creative. Yeah, and I also want to add like having them run reliably. Because I've had so many, like when a new developer comes to your team and there's this set of instructions to get the project going, install this, pull these files from this repository, you need to get access to this system. And there was always like these little things that just didn't work quite right. And there was like these little bugs in like it was pulling from the server which was timing out, and then the local cache of the bash script got out of sync and like
caching issues are going to be one of those ones where you probably run into once in a while, both locally and on CircleCI, because they're always one of those things that take a second to figure out, oh, my cache is out of date or something like that. And that's what happens to me all the time whenever I globally install some kind of NPM module, and then I forget to do that on the CircleCI part, because if you don't actually like save it, it won't go into your package JSON, and then you have to, it's a whole process. So it really is good to do that too, because when you're running it on your own machine, there might be things in your environment that are allowing it to work, and then you go to deploy it somewhere that doesn't have that thing that you need, and it doesn't work.
Antipixelated. Code coverage can be dangerous though. Recently I was writing some integration tests and we were doing a series of Postgres queries, which we had 100% code coverage on, but I decided that we should wrap it in a transaction block for safety. Now we have a problem because we have to write some tests to deliberately trigger the query to fail. Ha!
The right test to that's yep.
But like
that is correct.
Yeah, sure. But like, do integration tests though? Do you really? I think that an integration test doesn't really have to necessarily test failure state. That's kind of like what you can do with a unit test. Or am I thinking wrong?
Yeah, you generally don't try to break it. Sort of. I mean, you look for expected results, right? So I guess that's when you're doing like your automated testing, I don't see it very commonly. In fact, I think it would mess up most testing frameworks' outputs, but you don't generally expect a broken result, right? So like when you're looking at an assertion library, you say, I expect this thing to happen, but I haven't quite seen too many things where I expect this to not happen.
Oh yeah. The Magoo73, Docker is so helpful to get new folks up to speed fast. No more works on my machine. Combine it with CI builds so the builds are repeatable and you have a massive win. Like that's also one of the things I like about like the CircleCI, and I guess like most CI providers move to Docker because that forces you to put your thingies in a Docker thing, and that means that everybody can run, like the builds are now Docker based and predictable in a completely different way.
It makes a lot of development easier. I mean, you could make arguments about this, I'm sure, but I would say it's also more secure, especially I actually just recently learned about multi-stage Docker builds, which is a pretty cool way to basically create a Docker image. Quite often when you're making a Docker image, you have to install something. So like part of that process in building is to install, and of course that downloads some files and runs some installation stuff. And with multi-stage Docker builds, what you can say is, okay, I want to keep all those files that I just generated, but otherwise I'm going to start over. And that will actually get rid of these like old dependencies and things that might just be living in your operating system otherwise, which is just a really clean state to get to with as minimal attack vectors as possible, other than the fact you are running in Docker, which should be entirely secure, but I know someone's going to point that out.
I love it. Like Chris points out that 100% coverage is too high of a target. You will end up writing tests for the sake of it. Though having some bar is very useful, as it can be a thing that slips and then you have a mountain to climb. And Harry also points out that when I'm writing tests, I always have this feeling that it isn't enough what to do. This is one place where I would like to make a push for that programmers should be more aware of their own psychology. Because it feels like programmers have this belief that they are not affected by cognitive biases and that their brains are not affected by dopamine. Like all other humans, I know about dopamine and all these like reward effects and but that's for non-intellectuals. And the thing is, like, if you have this 100% target, that means that it's gonna like trigger that OCD part of your brain. And that is very dangerous because that is very strong. It's that thing that just keeps you up at night because a random person is wrong on the internet. You're just like wasting time on this thing and it feels really important. Because like there's 100 buckets and one of them is not filled and it feels wrong. It's not really wrong, but it feels wrong. So like if you're not aware of your feelings and can observe your feelings, then you are bound to be ruled by them.
I would definitely recommend going and just go to a GitHub repo of a open source, like a very public, very popular open source project, because there's a very good chance they're running a CI pipeline. I know, for instance, just because I'm a huge fan of them, Vue.js runs on CircleCI. So I mean, you can go to the Vue.js GitHub and then go look at their CircleCI folder and kind of see what they're doing. But I was going to say with code coverage, yeah, I mean, I never see anyone with it at 100%. I can't tell you what a good target is, but I can say that I see people in that 80%, even that's a little high area, maybe like 60 to 80% seems to be pretty normal in my opinion.
Yeah, one thing that one dream I have that I would like to do, I'm not sure if anybody has actually done this yet, but the thing that I did to get people to write unit tests at Spotify was that I went in to the pull request and then I pulled it down and then I just changed like one line of code in their commit, like the core code. Just arbitrarily, just replaced like a boolean with 5 or whatever, some that would completely weird out the code, and then I pushed that and saw if the tests were breaking, and if they weren't, I would just mention that, like, yeah, I could actually remove this entire section of code and no tests were breaking. Could you please add a test for this? And eventually, like, the people in my teams got really good at testing because I knew that I was going to do this. But like the thing is, like, didn't really understand the code. I just arbitrarily changed lines. So I figured that a computer would be able to do that. So I would love to have a plugin that actually tests that.
I can't remember where I've seen it. It's been a long time, but someone was experimenting with programming completely with AI. Yeah. And I think the end result was they wanted some kind of decompiler that would take a look at like assembly language and just spit out some like C++ or something like that. I feel like that might be possible, so I would love to see that.
Yeah, Robert Tibbet says there is a way to do that. I've heard of it. There was a thing that could actually change your code to see if the tests would actually caught the break. Yeah, I've heard of this. I think that we even discussed this on the show at some point. _Funk points out this is a superb video about testing by Sandy Metz. She's brilliant, and this will help you feel like you're writing the right kind of test and have the right coverage.
Oh, I think what Robert's talking about is called fuzzing. Is that what you were?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, fuzzing testing. I don't see that in web applications. I mean, that should be a thing. I see that all the time in like C++ and other compiled languages, fuzzing,
Yeah.
but not something I generally see in applications. Probably should be, though. I'm going to look into that more. I'm not entirely sure how that differs from a compiled language to something like, I don't know if there's a fuzzing framework for JavaScript. There almost certainly is, though.
Oh, this is interesting. I should check that. Yeah, because Rails really worked out a lot of things with testing. I learned unit testing and integration testing and BDD and all those things during the Rails era. They were so good at that.
I think testing in general is still pretty new for most people. It was certainly new for me when I first even started at CircleCI, which is a funny story. But for anyone who doesn't know what testing is, would recommend getting the jump on it. If you don't know what testing is and you don't know what Docker is, those are both great things to just have in the industry in general. And I feel like both are just essential skills for any developer, really, to have at least a moderate understanding of, especially when you're going to be working with teams that are implementing these things. So it would not be a bad thing to have on the resume.
Oh, mutation. Oh, yes, this is the one. This is the one.
Mutation testing.
Yeah, Striker Mutator. So this can do mutation testing on JavaScript. This will do this.
Well, now I need to know what's the difference between mutation testing and fuzzing testing. I'm not familiar with mutation testing.
Oh yeah. Oh shit. Nobody has pointed this out yet. Carter says, is Steve's Twitter correct? He looks very different, like a different person. I have still like Steve Krause on your... I forgot to update your Twitter account. Like Steve Krause is also a great person to follow, but I'm gonna update that. That's hilarious. Like
here we go. We got some fuzzing is changing random inputs, where mutation is if I change the code, the test should fail. Okay, I'm gonna definitely look. I mean, fuzzing has some very valid testing purpose. In fact, I have to assume that there's a good reason to introduce that in your web applications. I don't know why I don't see it. Oh, here's a good point. Mozilla Security FunFuzz, a framework I have open here, their code coverage percentage is at 56%.
Oh.
If you were curious about a large open source project.
So now you're gonna see me here, like I'm gonna live deploy my web overlay. Whoop. Behind the scenes. And this is just, this is dirty coded. I'm working on a prettier code base that is actually backed by CircleCI and deployed live. But this is my first version that is just a hunk of garbage.
Is that Tony Stark? Where do we have Tony Stark?
What? No, people say that I look like Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, I see it. I see it.
It's a nice compliment, isn't it?
You might work on the team. That would make sense.
There we go. Boom.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that distracted me. Did somebody write something in? Malachi says more look like Luigi from Super Mario.
Dynamic symbolic execution. Ballmer's Peak is throwing out some good knowledge on some very fringe testing methodologies.
Holy shit.
I shouldn't say very fringe.
Dynamic symbolic execution. I like that.
I think you'll definitely find, fuzzing testing has been around forever.
Yeah.
But it's weirdly not a thing I see people do. I'm not saying people don't do it. I'm definitely not saying that. And I deal almost exclusively with seeing like Ruby applications and JavaScript and PHP. So like I do find that those things exist more in like C++, maybe C#, things like that. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with, I feel like there's different groups that are just find, if you're a certain type of programmer, you might find certain types of tests more applicable, but these are probably all things that you should be running against your code, especially depending on your size. Some of these more interesting ones, I'm going to spend more time looking at myself.
Yeah,
Yeah, as Robert says, any tests at all is a pretty solid win.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's ridiculous how much value you get out of your first tests. Like just the fact that it's kind of like if it runs one test that validates one thing, that at least means that the app runs. Because there's so many times where like I've been like really cocky and just deployed the thing, like I changed this little thing, it can't possibly breaks, and I take down
Just
production.
kidding, totally breaks. Yeah, never in the way you expected either.
Yeah.
This is definitely something I see very like necessary with those orb integrations. My day-to-day job, my code gets touched by lots of hands all the time, and when you have lots of people who, even we're talking about ourselves not knowing our own code and running into tests, but even if you're super cocky and think you know your code extremely well, other people don't. If you are, working with other people, testing is pretty necessary.
Oh yeah, _func. This is another interesting one. Oddly, I use tests to prevent myself from getting too complicated. If it's hard to test, it's probably overly complicated. Yes. Like I find that it's one super interesting aspect with testing is that you write a piece of code and then I constantly become shocked by how many tests are required to test like just like 10 lines of code or something. Programming languages are so expressive nowadays that there's so many cases that you can express that it's just nuts. And maybe like those 20 lines of code don't look all that complicated, but it might actually be 40 different cases that needs to be working, and that the code is relying on it.
Being aware that you have to write tests can also help you kind of format your code in the first place in a more structured way. As long as you're aware, like, oh, hey, I do have to write tests for this later, there's a okay chance you're going to write cleaner code.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out CircleCI if you're in the business, in shopping for a continuous integration solution in the cloud. Use the link in the episode description to tell them that you came from here. If you want to watch this live stream in its entirety, you can do so at twitch.tv/funfunfunction. That is also where you can find, where you can follow, so that you don't miss when I live stream on Mondays at 7 a.m. Pacific time. If you like these clips on YouTube, you can subscribe by clicking here, or check out like some more clips here immediately if you want. I am MPJ. Until next Monday morning, stay curious.